Indigenous children will have the same opportunities as non-Indigenous Australians. Political commentator Patricia Carvella spoke with the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Nigel Scullion, earlier this afternoon.
Minister, welcome.
Thanks, Patricia.
After more than a decade, Australia is on track to meet just 2 of the 7 closing the gap targets. Year 12 attainment and early education are the positives. That's 1 target less than last year. What happened?
Well, it's hard to know. These variations in the targets, generally speaking, we have had for the last decade now that literacy and numeracy have actually improved right across the board. Now, this year we've had a slip down, and that could be for a whole range of reasons. It is really important, though, that we acknowledge that this is actually not a function of not getting better. They just haven't got done as well as the improvements we have had in mainstream. Now, there's a lot of issues around NAPLAN in mainstream in any event. And I think it's emblematic about the nature of how you actually build this target. We don't need necessarily the chunky target. We need to ensure that the targets are around a test that everybody actually does, and we need to avoid some of these perversities. But look, you're right. These are only 2 targets. We slipped one last year. The one we got back last year was due to an investment and some changes in the philosophy that I had. Early childhood is important, so every single provider that I have actually invests in ensuring that the people that work for them, that their community value getting kids to preschool and actually ensure that we are embarking on our early childhood journey. So that's worked.
You've been Indigenous Affairs Minister for 6 years. What responsibility do you take for this result?
Well, I take full responsibility. I really do, whether you can blame the states and the other jurisdictions. But I think, you know, we're not doing as badly as that says. There are so many areas that we're doing really well in. And the challenge is very much in terms of the way that those targets are designed. They're very poorly designed. I think everybody acknowledges that, in that they're not only a target to get better, but if, you know, we actually have to get better faster than mainstream. Now, nobody knows how fast mainstream is going.
I know you've been critical of the design and, you know, putting it on Labor a bit for its original design. But as I said, you've been minister for 6 years. That's a long time to be able to fix these targets if you thought they were flawed. Well,
first, can I say, in every area, there have been significant improvements in each of these fields. In each of these fields, there are significant improvements. So it's no point saying, oh, but you haven't caught up. Well, that's fine. But in any other area, for example, we'll say, has there been improvements? Yes. Have they been significant? Yes. Are they sustained? Yes. But because of the variables about the rest of Australia, the wealthy, the middle class Australia that started out so much further ahead in every element, no, we haven't caught up with them in every element. But we have been doing a lot better across some of these fields. And as I've said, where we have the reach of the lever. So it's not the delivery of education because we don't have it, the delivery of health because we can't have it. So the only reason that we've got continuing sustainable children finishing 12th secondary school is because I've invested nearly $500 million in people finishing that, because that's within our reach.
All right, Minister, you know, you say you want to work with Indigenous people as partners to try and improve this through the Refresh project.
That's what we've been doing.
Sure, but Bill Shorten has responded and they want to prioritise the Uluru Statement from the Heart. They say that referendum is important. Isn't that the most obvious way to get Indigenous people to have a voice, to actually enshrine a voice in the Constitution? You talk about wanting to be partners, but you don't support the voice.
Well, I've never said that. What I've said is...
Well, you have been opposed to the voice.
Hang on. No, I said, let's listen to some of my Indigenous colleagues. Senator McCarthy, Senator Dodson. They're part of a Senate inquiry into the voice. What did they recommend? They said we need more time to work out what that means. They didn't say, let's go and have it, as Bill Shorten has said. In fact, Bill Shorten has ignored his own colleagues in this matter. What I'm saying, like every Australian, look, I don't want something to fail. What does a voice mean? It's not for me to decide that. And we asked the Referendum Council to decide that. And a voice at the moment is a word. We haven't got any other detail around that.
OK, so when you have some meat on the bones on that...
I don't set people up to fail. It's so important we don't set people up to fail.
When there's some meat on the bones, might you campaign for a voice to be enshrined in the Constitution?
Well, that's completely hypothetical, but let me tell you, we'll need to know that, absolutely. And if it's something that actually changes things positively for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, of course I would. But can I say today, it's pretty exciting to be surrounded by the peak bodies of Indigenous service delivery, by the heads of those peak bodies. They have, you talk about a voice, you know, they now are co-designing not only these targets, but they'll be co-designing exactly how we're delivering the services. You know, the CDP that Bill Shorten so glibly cut the throat of in the Parliament today, without a single word of consultation to a single Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person, you know, that was actually supported.
Well, Labor has been consulting on the CDEP to come to that position. Look, the Prime Minister...
I disagree completely.
Well, they have been consulting with Aboriginal people. But either way, let's just leave that because this isn't an interview with a Labor person. The Prime Minister has proposed to waive the students' debts of teachers who spend 4 years in remote communities. 79% of Indigenous people live outside remote communities. How does that help them?
Well, the reason we need to help those people in the communities, because when you actually look at the NAPLAN test, the ones who are really failing and pushing down the bottom end actually live in the remote communities. You're right. Those people who are getting educated in the major communities, they're doing far better. So we're actually targeting our efforts about where it's needed, and we're actually heeding the advice of our colleagues in this matter, people like the Peaks. They know where we actually need those efforts because the data through the NAPLAN test and what the major GPOs, the worse the outcomes are. And that's why we need to make our investments where they're needed.
Minister Bill Shorten urged Parliament to recognise that
the major GPOs, the worse the outcomes are. And that's why we need to make our investments where they're needed.
Minister Bill Shorten urged Parliament to recognise that racism still exists in Australia in 2019. Do you accept that, and do you think that's part of the issue we're seeing here?
Well, I don't know if it's part of the issue we're seeing, but of course it exists. I talk about it all the time. And I think part of the issue is about talking about it. I don't think people even understand some of this passive racism and the pernicious way that it actually has a practical impact on people. Of course it exists. It's all pretty self-evident.
Is it also leading to the gap that we see?
Well, I don't know what contribution it has. It's a very negative thing, and so I imagine it must make some contribution. But, you know, this is a time where we need to all work together to find solutions. Observations and word waivers, that's all pretty good, but we need to get on the job with engaging our first Australians in jobs, in employment and in education. Those are the principal drivers of equality. So they're the things we need to drive. We need to continue to have conversations about these other matters, but in terms of the effect of why there is still such a gap, I wouldn't have thought racism would have been the only one or the sole issue. Sure, it's a part of a mix of things that we always need to work on. But what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are telling me is, get me an education, help me get into a job. And that's why it's just fantastic to see that out of the 412,000 jobs that were created by the economy last financial year, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders took 40,000 of them. That's 10% of the growth with 3% of the population, and they're the ones who need to be congratulated, not being with the government. It's their efforts that need to be recognised. And I think that's the start of a proper partnership and a real relationship for the future.
Minister, many thanks for your time.
Lovely to talk to you, Patricia.